everybody needs an advocate.
Because I'm not there 24/7.
Families that have hemophilia mature faster.
I've been feeling a lot of anxiety lately.
I'm so tired of being strong.
To understand how far we've come helps you appreciate where we are now.
No is just no for this person. Somebody's gonna say yes sooner or later.
And it helps you understand that there are more steps to be taken in the future.
You're the first person I've met with a bleeding disorder.
Let's fight the disease and not the people who have it.
Why aren't we talking about hemophilia? What are we talking about instead?
I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes back in the early 70s. I had no idea what I was involved with. All I knew was my mother was crying. And I was like, Mom, you want me to drive home? And she's like, you're 11. And I was like, well, you know, someone's got to drive. And we get home, and all I kept hearing over the weekend before I was admitted into the hospital to, I guess, be evaluated, was that this was fatal. Because that's what it was back in the 70s. It was really not a good disease to have as a young child. And there were 2 other diabetics in school with me, because every once in a while we'd end up in the nurse's office and stuff. And I remember asking the nurse, oh, where's, I think it was Michael and Jennifer. They died. Went to college, educated myself, and the doctor I worked with came into my office and he gave me a piece of paper. And he said, call this guy. I said, you know, why? He says, they have the pump. I was working, so I had to leave work a little bit early, and I had this appointment to go to this hospital in, I don't even know if it was Queens or it wasn't Manhattan. And I get a phone call from this salesperson. He's like, where are you? And I said, well, I'm still in Seaford working. And he's like, well, I'm at the hospital. He said, I can't wait. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, you're supposed to be here. And I was like, no. So I met him in the parking lot of Levitt's Furniture in Garden City. And I sat in his seat, and he gave me this box with the pump, and he showed me how to use it, and showed me how to fill it, and this and that, and I gave him $1,000. And I always look back at that, and I say, God, if a cop had ever pulled up,
just like every other clinical experience any of us have ever had, right? You show up in a Levitt's, and you pay a guy in cash in a car for a thing.
And I got the box. 33 years ago, I was the first diabetic on the insulin pump to deliver a baby, connected to the pump, and I nursed. They never would let insulin-dependent diabetics nurse because it would mess up your sugars. But the amazing thing is that my son was born at 4.5 pounds, perfect. You have to be responsible. You know, you never want to be in a situation where it's out of your control. Now going to my endocrinologist, because it's been close to 50 years, but I'll say, why am I experiencing this? And, you know, what's it from? And he's like, we don't see diabetics as old as you, as long as you. Most diabetics went on the pump back in those days because they were having complications. They already were going through kidney failure and strokes, and they wanted to try and, you know, see if they could recoup something. And I was one of the first to go on it, totally healthy, no complications. I've got my pump and my little box, and I'm just still amazed sometimes when I walk around and I say, wow, you know, this thing's attached. So when I go to a doctor, especially if it's a new doctor, and they go, you know, there's something you can do other than the pump. We can change your medicine. I say, yeah, no, I'm not giving up my pump. And the first pump, I laugh when I think about it. I wish, you know, we think about medical and devices and, you know, how far you've come. When you think about it, you cryoprecipitate, and then factor, and the volumes of infusion, and just even being able to use butterflies, how much your life has gotten easier. The first pump was this big, and I wore it 24/7. And I mean, it was funny because, you know, families would say, you know, what do you got in there? Scotch, you know? So
you were like, good idea.
Yeah, I thought of it.
How would you, this is just purely on a functional level, something the size of like a VHS tape, would that be appropriate? Like, how would you wear that? Like, what was the wearing?
I used to I wore blazers, and I would cut holes in them, and I'd slide it in, and when I was going out, getting dressed up, luckily maxi dresses were in style, I used to take the, this tape that hockey players used to use to tape their legs so that the tape that they actually used wouldn't stick to the hair on their legs. Okay. And a couple of my friends were hockey players, and I would tape my pump here, and if I went out to dinner or something, I'd hitch the dress up and find the controls and take my dose.
I was intrigued when we talked before this about, when I asked you, how do you think your management of a chronic disorder throughout your life has helped you connect with this community, your first response was, you know, well, I think this community has actually done a lot to help me.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that?
When I started with bleeding disorders, it was 2001. I started doing more outreach and programs and insurance meetings and meeting new families, and I worked at the blood center and did a lot of insurance. I took the dog and pony show literally to the executive directors and the PharmD managers of the bigger insurance companies and explained to them how factor is not administered like insulin and it's not a temporary condition. And it opened my eyes to a different type of management that did involve. But I think because of my experience, maybe there was a connection. But in seeing how these parents, and I'll be blunt, some are helicopter parents, and some are nurturing, and I'm not saying helicopter is bad, but and some are just like trying to get their children to the point of independence and having ownership of who they are. And in seeing a lot of these families, and even talking to, not even the families, but talking to the individuals that have gone through life, some of the older adults, you've gone through life with this condition that maybe you don't want to tell people about. And sometimes it's good to tell people about it. It's good to share that. Never when you're going on a job interview, though. Definitely, don't share that. But it helped me to really say, you know what, I'm working, I'm doing this, but I have to take care of myself, because what kind of model would that set?
Right.
Because we keep saying, you have to take care of yourself. You have to make sure to, take your infusions. Exercise. Some terrible role model for that, but definitely. Take the tools that we're hopefully giving you and use them to make sure that you live to be old, crotchety people.
You had made a point when we were talking about, is there anything we haven't discussed in our pre-interview that feels particularly important? You had brought something up about primary care physicians. What was your what are your thoughts with regards to PCPs?
I love doctors. I do. I love the doctors that I've worked with. And the funny thing is that when something goes wrong, these doctors really aren't the doctors to take care of you. And you have to have a primary care physician, because they're going to put all the pieces together. They're going to do the detective work that you need, because unfortunately, having a chronic disease doesn't bar you from something that possibly could be worse or just could be an inconvenience. That would be my mantra, to really make sure that you guys follow through with all those other checkups. And of course, come to education conferences like this so you learn a lot.
You don't want things slipping through the cracks, and obviously you catch something, the earlier you catch something, the better. And clinical fatigue is a real thing, just like, we talk about infusion fatigue is a real thing.
I've always had joint issues, and they've linked it to my diabetes, and I've kind of, blown it off. But there was an occurrence where my shoulder really got bad, and I pushed it off because I was like, it's the arthritis, So by the time I did get it looked at by my orthopedist, he said, your cartilage is gone. And I went, oh, well, how do I get it back? And he says, you need a joint replacement. Maybe if I had not waited a year and said, oh, this is normal pain for me, I'm used to this pain. So nothing's normal. Pain should not be normal. So listen to your body.
Can you just give us the bird's eye view of your family's experience with hemophilia thus far?
Okay, well, first and foremost, I'm a mother of 3, like many here. That's the firstly. Secondly, I have 3 children, but 2 boys with severe hemophilia A, and my youngest has active inhibitors. So as you can imagine, there are many challenges there, but like most, everyone has a story. But my story comes about where you get married, you start having children, you don't suspect it. We have no family history. So I have a daughter, and then I have a son. And my oldest son goes undiagnosed for 2 years until my youngest is born. And it's incredible when you think about it. He went through many, many traumatizing situations, including an ankle bleed that went 1 year unresolved, and as a result, he is arthritic in that ankle. And when my youngest was diagnosed, of course, it was a complete shock. I had no idea what hemophilia was. And it was just a huge learning curve. I took it upon myself to learn as much as I could just by reading, staying up late every night, reading about it, and I just decided after a brief stint of depression, like most, right? You have to deal with the situation. You get through that, and you just decide that you're going to become the best advocate for your children. And the only way you can do that is just by learning. Empowering yourself through education is just the best way. So we've made decisions together, my doctors and myself, to do the best we could for them. But it's difficult living with an inhibitor.
And when did the inhibitor present for us? And your children are 11 and 9?
Yes,
right?
The boys are 11 and 9.
Milo here, when did the inhibitor first present?
Well, just when you think you have a hold of things and you're learning to infuse, factor 8, this inhibitor presents itself. And actually, it was myself who discovered it. I realized that he had gotten a head injury, and I had taken him to the ER to get infused, and it wasn't healing. He was about 1 year and 10 months old. And I said, please, can you test him for inhibitors, because I don't believe this factor is working. It's not resolving. And they did so, and within hours I had the results. And again, it was traumatizing. And you just start to receive immune tolerance and to do the best you can there. We did many years of that. And we're doing the best we can right now.
I want to underscore that you were the one to suggest that he may have inhibitors.
Right.
And I think that says a lot about the importance, to your point about events like these and education and staying current, being aware not just of the things you know you're managing, but of the other things that could be happening
right.
to your body,
right.
hemophilia related or otherwise.
Right.
What have the differences been in kind of managing the two boys, given that with an inhibitor, as we know, the diagnosis, it's almost like a whole other diagnosis.
It
right?
is, it is. It's very different, actually. And because I have both situations, I can say it's very different. My oldest son, infuses prophylactically 3 times a week. He does bleed every now and then, but it is rare, thankfully. He's not as active as he could be, but we're working on that, learning to swim and getting him more physically fit. With the inhibitor, it's just a different beast because you really can't be active, unfortunately. Anything like playing basketball can cause a bleed. And it has. And you just think, oh, he's on the court a couple of minutes. It's not a big deal. He's playing basketball. Well, the result is a bleed. You have to weigh, really, the psychological with the physical. And the thing is, with children, I think you do have to allow them, because you're trying to teach them to make good decisions. All you can do is really inform them and allow them to make the choice. Obviously, sometimes it results in a bleed, and hopefully they learn from that. And that's all you can hope for, because I can't make decisions for them for the rest of my life.
Right.
So you just teach them right from wrong, and you hope that they learn to take care of their bodies.
Can you tell us you've had some scary experiences with the port?
It's difficult to have the inhibitor, and they tell you that. Any surgery is difficult. And so he's had 4 ports. He's on his 4th port. He's had 5 surgeries to remove and place the port subsequently. And during one of the operations, he was a bit touch and go, where it could have gone really bad. He was traumatized because he woke up during the surgery and he felt it, and I was worried about what he would remember. And he felt the pain, and it was horrible. He didn't want to have another surgery, obviously. That was just a difficult point, but I think we chose to deal with it in just by talking to him and making him realize that we have to put that in the past and move forward, make the best of it, and I think always feel appreciative of the fact that he made it through the surgery. That's number 1. And always focus on what you have and not on what you don't have. And I tell them every day, you can walk and you can run. You may not be as active as you want to be, but really you have to feel fortunate for that. And I think if you focus on that every day, you can't go wrong. The future is bright.
As you mentioned it right at the top, that you're the mother of 3 children, and we're obviously talking about these 2 young men primarily for obvious reasons, but your daughter Bella is here as well. And we often hear that, the quote unaffected sibling, especially in a case where maybe we're managing an inhibitor, when there are just a lot of needs around one or more of the children, that the child that maybe doesn't have those needs, it's harder to keep them as involved or give the right amount of attention. How have you and your husband managed that with Bella?
Well, it's been difficult, and she can tell you that she hasn't come out of it unscathed. I think, like all children, they go through emotions. They go through jealousy, they go through feeling left out, they go through anxiety. They have to feel it, no matter how much you try to hide it. When you have to be in the hospital and you can only be at one place at a time, it's difficult for them. But I think she's learned to be stronger from it. She is active in the community now, she's 13, and I think she's learned to be a more compassionate person. She's compassionate for her brothers, and I know it will serve her well in the future. And what I'm always so really impressed about our community is the fact that we're so resilient. I think it's just not myself. It's the children, it's the adults, it's everyone. You find a way to make it through and to power through, really.
So give us a little context for Everest wasn't a one-off. You are climbing the highest mountains around the world. Give us a little more of that story.
So I'm trying to climb the 7 summits, so that's the highest mountain on each continent. Everest was number 6. So I started it with Kilimanjaro back in 2011, and that was actually the mountain that kind of was a turning point for me just in life in general, and that trip to Africa that I took. Because that was the moment where I really realized what hemophilia could look like around the world. I went to Kenya to help set up a lab and clinic for people with hemophilia, and the first day we were there, we actually saw a boy in the hospital that he had come in with abdominal pain, and they didn't know he had hemophilia. They weren't trained. Nobody knew what hemophilia was in that hospital, so they just cut his appendix out. And when we got there, he had been in the hospital for a week, just bleeding out, and they didn't know what to do. And luckily, the doctors we were with recognized he had hemophilia right away. You know, he had really swollen joints. He was 14 years old, and we didn't have the lab equipment set up yet, so they just guessed that he had hemophilia A, because it's more common. And they gave him factor VIII that they had brought with them. And he ended up living, which was really amazing, and left the hospital in the 2 weeks while we were there, which was spectacular. But it also just changed my whole perspective on life and what hemophilia really can be. But that's when I decided that I wanted to make this about something bigger and bringing awareness to hemophilia globally, but just hemophilia in general.
But you're also doing something right now, and you're in school for it, to continue your mission, so to speak. Can you speak to that a little bit?
So I think that moment in Kenya, and that really put some perspective on my life. And since that moment, I've just been trying to figure out ways that I can do more to help people with health disparities, mainly hemophilia around the world. So a year and a half ago, I applied for a master's program. So I'm getting a master's in global health. And I'm like just over a third of the way done, which is awesome.
Can you talk a little bit about that relationship with your clinicians to enable you to play baseball in high school and then in college?
Baseball was something I was obsessed with. It's kind of like how I'm obsessed with mountaineering now. It was something that consumed like every thought of every day. I was pretty fortunate. I didn't have a ton of bleeds when I was young, but as baseball started getting more competitive, the ball starts coming faster, and if you're going to get hit by a pitch, it's going to be a bleed. So I started having lots and lots of bleeds, and finally going into the HTC, they're like, well, if you want to keep playing, you're going to have to start prophylactically treating. And I have like a pretty intense needle issue. So I was not extremely excited about that, but they're like, well, that's the option. You either treat before the game or you don't play. And that was a big lesson for me. It was like, if this is something that I love and I want to do, I have to overcome this challenge. I remember this game, actually my senior year of college. He was a senior and I still wasn't very good at it. And I didn't infuse before the first game of the season. And first pitch hits me right in the elbow. And I was like, man. And so I had to sit out that whole game, and it was a doubleheader, so I sat out 2 games right to start the season. I was like, man, one day I'm gonna learn that lesson.
Life has a funny way of reminding you things like that sometimes, right? Yeah, and
I think that's translated into the mountaineering, of just making a plan, and if I want to do this, like I have to follow that plan, and if I don't, that's when I'm gonna get into trouble, and that's not really an option. And on a lot of these big mountains, there's not a way to get off of it quickly. So if you're not managing it, you're putting yourself in a really dangerous spot.
One thing I'd love to hear you speak to is the importance of being able to pursue your dreams. And you know, when people hear, oh, the guy who climbed a mountain and there's a documentary about it, there may be, and I've heard people say like, well, so is the idea like people with hemophilia should be climbing mountains or doing physical challenges? And what do you say to that?
So I think climbing mountains isn't for everybody, that's for sure. I think a lot of people are like, that's just crazy. I've always told Patrick through this whole thing that I don't want it to be about climbing the mountain, you know? It's about finding something that you're truly passionate about and you truly care about, and just persisting and keep striving towards, you know, achieving that goal. You know, that persistence to like, if you keep working towards it and moving towards it and like taking those small steps, you know, I guess mountaineering is like a very good metaphor for that. It's like you take small steps, you know, over a really long time and you'll finally reach that goal. So I think that's what we wanted this all to be about, is just finding that passion, finding that thing that drives you, that gut monkey, and just embracing it completely. And not letting hemophilia be a reason to not go after your dream. Yeah, and finding a way to achieve that dream with your hemophilia, and like working with your HCC to find that plan, and having that conversation with your HCC and working with them to make a plan, you know? And I think, you know, my doctors were very open about it, and they also made me very aware of like consequences and like, you know, what happens if something goes wrong, and I'm like, yeah. And they helped me through all of that, and I think that was a really important conversation. So again, talking about that high school, college, then baseball ends, and there's the gap before you discovered mountaineering. How has mental health and your chronic disorder, what's been your mental health chronic disorder relationship at various stages of your life? I struggled a lot with my hemophilia, especially, you know, through high school, college, and then that point right after college where I didn't, you know, I graduated and didn't have baseball. So I wasn't engaged with the hemophilia community, really in any way. So as I started having more bleeds, and then I started having to do my prophylactic treatment and start infusing, I really resented having it, and I didn't understand why I was the one having to deal with this, you know, having to infuse and having bleeds, and, you know, watching my teammates get to play. They get hit by a pitch and they're fine, and I'm sitting out for, you know, games, even though maybe I didn't infuse before. But that's a different story. And then it was like after college is where I would say I hit kind of my low point. So I kind of just stopped, and then I had tons and tons of bleeds. And but then I kind of got connected with the community. I found mountaineering. The community was probably the biggest thing to change my perspective on my condition, to not resent it anymore and embrace it, and not let it define me. And I think that was the big turning point for me, was getting engaged in the community and then finding that reason to infuse again and take care of myself again. So it was a couple challenging years in there of lots of bleeds and just, yeah, kind of, it was a rough patch, very rough patch.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because you're making a correlation there between the rough patch and a lack of self-care. Yeah. And not that a lack of self-care is the only reason that you may go through a rough patch, but it does exacerbate rough patches, and or it triggers or exacerbates rough patches. Yeah, right? When you're like, you know, laying on the couch all bunch of the time with bleeds and just frustrated, like you're having to do that, like it wears on you. It wears on you a lot. So, yeah, it's been a good journey after that, you know. But I have to like say, it's a lot to do with the community and feeling that belonging for the first time, which was pretty powerful. I want to thank Linda, Liz, and Chris for participating.
To watch video from any of our previous Powering Through sessions, visit poweringthrough.org, or to learn more about National Cornerstone Healthcare Services, NCHS, visit nchswecare.com.